A little while ago, and he said something about it. And he needed, oh, I know what I gotta do. And Terry said, does it require gate? Is it on?
No, we don't have to think about that now.
No, do I need to ask her a question?
Yeah, you can go.
Oh,
It's on.
okay. So, Mom and Dad. I'll go with Dad first. Growing up on the farm, what was your favorite memory?
Probably the thing I enjoyed the most was the freedom to do whatever I wanted to, without any supervision or anyone worrying about where I was. Spent a lot of time outside. Wintertime, sleigh riding on the hills was a favorite pastime. When I was 9, I got my first bicycle, so I could ride it anytime I wanted to out there in the open country. So activities outdoors was my most favorite things.
Did you, I think I remember you telling a story about going to town on a wagon with your grandfather.
Yes. It was about a 12-mile trip with a 4-wheel wagon pulled by a team of mules. And every Saturday it was a routine. Rain or shine, snow or hot, whatever, would make this trip. And he would take his eggs to market, use the money to buy some staples, groceries of some type. And so every Saturday that was a routine. If the weather was good, it wasn't bad. But if it was cold, we were bundled up in blankets and still made the trip.
Mom, where did you exactly grow up in your childhood? And what area? I know it was the DC area, but what area? And did you have aunts and uncles that lived close and other cousins?
Yeah, I grew up, born and raised in Washington, D.C. And we had quite a bit of family close by. My Aunt Mildred and Uncle Fred and their children Della and Leroy always lived fairly close when I was real young. And when I got older, they moved to Suitland, Maryland. And I guess I just remember the city because I always lived there. And so we lived in neighborhoods that they called row houses. And so you had lots of neighbors, and then neighbors watched out for the neighborhood kids. They were like extended family, you know, if I did something wrong, they were telling my mom and dad that what I'd done. And I lived there until I was in my late 20s.
Was it the same house and street the whole time?
No, we lived in Washington, D.C. When I was real young, we lived on what was called C Street. And then we moved to 18th Place. And that's where Emmett was born. Because there's 5 years between Emmett and I. And we lived there, and then we moved to 20th Street, Northeast, 444. Can remember that number. And that's where Mary was born. And Mary's 12 years younger than I am. And that's also where they had a child, Jackie, that died when she was just a month old. And my dad worked at the Naval Weapons Plant, and we just had one car like most people, and he took that to work. So the rest of us, you know, that were home, we walked. I always walked to school, and we, you know, it wasn't a great distance, but then when Emmett started school, I was responsible for him. That was a trip. And then, so Mary being so far behind me, you know, she was never a part of that. Walking to school. I went to Kingsman Elementary School, Elliott Junior High School, and Eastern High School. And Emmett did the same until my family, after I got married, they moved to Anacostia. And Emmett went to school in Anacostia then, and Mary. And living in Washington, D.C. was really a great place to live. And like I said, you walked most everywhere, and we didn't live far from Library of Congress, which I could walk to do studies and books there, because we didn't have another library that was any closer than that. So I went to the Library of Congress, and you could get books, and they'd reserve them for when you come back the next time.
Huh.
And so, you know, being all the federal buildings and museums, and my dad would take me down to Washington to the museums. Not every Sunday, but quite a few Sundays he would take me there, and we'd go through museums, and he'd read, you know, everything. He loved museums. And he was always kind of an amateur photographer, and had a friend, Matt Draft, that was a photographer. So they took lots of pictures of me when I was little, being the only child for 5 years. And I can't really think of other experiences in the city, except that there were lots of children, lots of families, and living in a row house. You were all on the same street, so we played in the street, played kickball or tag or hide and seek, or people were always outside. The kids were, you came home when the street lights came on. So it was a good life then.
Good memories.
Yeah.
Dad, were you drafted or enlisted in the Navy?
The Korean War was in progress, and the draft board was drafting people who were eligible. I was classified as 1A, which means I was highly qualified to be drafted. And only the Army and the Marines were drafting. So if they drafted, you were headed for the Army or Marines, one or the other. You didn't have a choice. The Navy and Air Force was not drafting. So I was a good friend of the draft board, and they agreed to tell me if my time was coming up to be drafted into the service. And so they called and notified me that I was within about a couple of months of being called up for active duty. So I quickly went in and enlisted in the Navy to avoid the draft into the Marines or the Army. I went for my physical, passed the physical, and they gave me a report for duty in a couple of weeks after that date. I went for boot camp training in the Navy in San Diego. I'd been out there a couple of weeks. My mother and my folks received notice from the Army to report for duty in the Army. But I was already in the Navy, so my folks said, oops, you missed him, he's gone. So that enlisted for 4 years. And went through boot camp, San Diego. This was a farm kid that had never been more than 50 miles from home. I was 19. And my experience in life away from the farm was very limited. So it was a real eye-opener. And a little bit concerning for me, because I didn't know how to respond to a lot of what was going on. So anyway, I spent about 3 or 4 months in San Diego. Went through a battery of exams that they give you as part of the boot camp training to figure out how you would best serve them. Then they decide for you what you're going to do. So I took a bunch of tests, and I didn't know how they rated things, but they posted, according to your serial number, your grades for the battery of tests. And I didn't know what was good or bad, but I could compare mine with the list of others, and I thought, well, I had a lucky day when I took those tests, I guess. So I came out and they said, we're sending you to another school, a preparatory school in Norman, Oklahoma. So I went from San Diego to Norman, went through a 2-month preparatory school, and from there then, how you did in that school, they let you decide, maybe give you an idea of what you would like to do. And the part that interested me the most was weather. So I said, yeah, I'd like to be an aerographer's mate. They said, well, that school's in Lakehurst, New Jersey. We'll see if there's an opening. I qualified for it, and that started my career in weather. So I went directly from Norman to Lakehurst, went through a basic weather school there, and from there they said, it's time for you to have some sea duty. And I thought, well, I don't think I'm gonna like ship. I don't think I want to live on a ship. So, but there were a couple of ballots, or 3, that were open for land duty that was considered sea duty. So they sent me to Argentia, Newfoundland, and that was considered sea duty. It took care of my obligation for sea duty and service, kept me off the boat. And so I went to Argentia, worked weather up there. I was up there a year and a half. Came back and they said, well, what would you like to do? And I said, do you have any more schools I can go to? They said, yeah, we've got another weather school, a more advanced school in Lakehurst. So they sent me back to Lakehurst for another 4-month school in weather. And finished that, and I was now down to where I only had a year and a half left. And they said, where you want to go? I said, Olathe, Kansas. That's where I'd like to go. They said, fine. I got my orders at Corpus Christi, Texas. So I went to Corpus Christi and spent the last year and a half working weather down there. So it was, everything couldn't have been better in that 4-year tour. I have no bad thoughts, and it set me on a career that lasted 38 years, working weather. So how lucky can you be?
Yeah.
So Mom, I remember you telling stories about riding a train down to Clifton Forge to see your grandmother. What was that? I mean, why were you by yourself on riding the train?
Well, trains were big then. People used trains to commute a lot. And I was 5 and World War II was underway. And so my mother was pregnant with Emmett. And so they put me on a train for most of a day ride because it stopped at every town all the way down with the mail. And both of my grandfathers, my granddad Simpson and my granddad Cunningham, both worked for the railroads. So I could ride free. And they knew a lot of the people that worked on the trains, the conductors and the engineers and so forth. Because Clifton Forge was a turnaround place. That's where the trains went to, and then they turned and went back. And so they put me on the train at 5 to go to see my grandmother Simpson because Mother was going to have the baby. And all the way down, there's all these military servicemen are on the train because it's wartime. And I sat on that train for the day, and I don't think I spoke to anybody. Just sat there because that's what they said. Just sit in your seat, and the conductor will take care of you when you get to Clifton Forge. And so my granddad Cunningham met me, though, because he didn't live far from the trains. And he come out and meet me, and we I spent a day or two with him, and then my granddad Simpson had a car. So he came over and got me. They lived in Selma, and took me to Grandma Simpson, Granddad Simpson. His name was Emmett, and my grandmother was Della. And so staying there, you know, with them, my granddad was pretty sick, and he died while I was there, and Emmett was born while I was there. So I guess I was probably company for my grandmother, and she was company for me. So it was a good experience to be able to see your grandparents that way. And they never did come to Washington. None of them came to Washington, you know, when I was growing up. Now, Grandma Simpson ended up with Parkinson's disease, so she came and lived with Mildred and us, you know, back and forth, part-time with Mildred, mostly with Mildred and part-time with us, until she went into a hospital. So it was a good experience with grandparents. My granddad Cunningham, his name was Romanuel, and he was married for the second time because my dad's mother died when he was just 2. So she was not as much a grandmother. Back then, stepmothers or step-grandmothers didn't really have anything to do with the early offspring. And so my granddad would take me around Clifton Forge, show me off, and take me to a movie, and he didn't have a car. So, but he had this bridge. He lived in town, but there was like a swing bridge from his house over across the little creek. And it was scary as the devil to me because it was just little slats of boards, and it was with ropes. And you cross that creek, and he had hogs on the other side in a pen. So we'd go over there to what he called slop the hogs. You'd take a bucket of slop, you know, the garbage from the house, and then they'd put some grain in it. So he'd always make me go first, and when I would, he'd shake the bridge, so I would scream all the way across.
Oh, well, when he used to take you in the basement.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was good.
And it was a big one.
All right.
At least to me.
There's,
Jerry, you wanna?
Well, you were talking about Greenville Farms and camping, and I know that we had an old canvas tent is how we started, right?
yes, it was made for probably 2 or 3 people to camp in, so we put 6 in it. And it was floor-to-floor air mattresses from wall to wall. And if one person turned over, everybody had to turn over at the same time to keep from getting laid on. And it was always so funny. And then air mattresses were probably something that I bought for $2 a piece, and they would spring leaks. So all night long, you'd hear somebody putting air back into their air mattresses because it had gone flat and they were sleeping on the ground. So all night, lots of puffing going on.
And Mom, you had a list, right? You'd get everybody ready when Dad was at work on Friday.
Yeah. I had a list that I copied that I do check off every time we camped. But I think Dad forgot to mention that Eddie came along while we still had the tent, and we got him a crib that was a portable crib, and you could put the legs up, and he slept in that on top of somebody else that was in a sleeping bag. And one time we were camping at Greenville Farms, and it was so cold, and we had this thing for Eddie that fastened around his face, and it was all one piece thermal type bag that he slept in. And we woke up, he had frost, had frozen around his mouth.
It slipped right through it.
So that was the beginning of our camping as a family. And then we went to I guess you call it a pop-up, the Apache, and it had hard sides, and we all would fit in there nice, except for storage of clothes and things we wanted to take. So everybody had a box, and every what you could get in that box, that's what you got to take camping. Clothes or books or whatever. And we camped for months at a time. We'd go up to Missouri to see grandparents, Cleta and Forrest, or go to the national parks, to most all the national parks, Wyoming, Frontier Days. But when we stopped with the camper, we had a big old station wagon, a Vista Cruiser, and we'd get to the park and everybody jump out and had a job setting up camp. Even Eddie.
So what do you think the secret is to a long and happy marriage?
The secret.
Is there a secret, or what's the process, or how do you do it? That should be just a real short answer.
Well, love is important, and respect,
And forgiveness, you know. If things happen that you don't like, try to overlook those if you can, rather than make it an issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Yeah, be understanding.
What about coming into a marriage where you have 3 stepchildren? I mean, how did you do that? And Mom, how did you let Dad, I mean, when you're blending like that, you parented us for so many years, and then Dad came in and had to start parenting with you.
Yeah.
well, I respected his opinion, and I knew that he wouldn't do anything to any of you kids that I wouldn't, as far as punishment or jobs or chores or what he expected from you in your daily life. And I thought that we pretty much agreed on those things.
And that's important. Mom never once, never objected to any sort of correction I made to you kids, like you were doing something wrong. Never once did she say, I wouldn't do that, or I don't think you should say that. Never once.
Why is that, Mom?
Because I respected his opinion. I felt it was very similar to mine. So, you know, people were amazed that Dad could come into a family with 3 children. But you were all good. You accepted Dad as soon as he
Yeah.
was around, and after we had dated for a while, you all accepted him. So, I think it was a mutual thing.
I'll try to say a couple of things here without making a fool of myself. But you kids made it easy.
That's enough.
Yeah.
And then, we were married, a year and a half, and during that time, we went to Oklahoma while Dad was in school for a year out there doing graduate work, and I got pregnant with Eddie. So Eddie really comes from Oklahoma. He was born in Washington, D.C., just like all of you, but
That explains a lot.
Mm-hmm.
we moved back to Virginia from Oklahoma. And then that's where we had Eddie, and we lived in Springfield, and we had a nice situation there with schools and parks and a lake and things close by that back then children could run and do things without supervision. And so you all had the swimming pool and the lake, and you could bike and do all those things.
Yeah.
And Eddie could bike with me. I had a little seat on the back of my bike that now would be outlawed, but it was a little metal seat that fit on the back of my bike. And he was less than a year when I started taking him with me on the bike, and we'd get home or get close to home, say within a block, and he'd say, more. So that's where his love of bikes come from, I think.
So, prior to that last question, how did you guys first meet and know that you were in love and in love enough to take on 3 kids and
Your turn.
for you the commitment of that?
Well, it's a story that you've all heard, I think, but it's worth repeating, I guess. I worked with the National Weather Satellite Center. I'd been there for probably 2 years or over a year, and it was a small unit. There were only 100 people in this center working there, so everyone knew everyone. And I went to work one day and saw this gal walk down the thing, and it was a new face, a new body.
I noticed where you were looking when you said that.
And not the face.
And so I thought, wonder who that is, because I hadn't seen her before. And I had friends, everybody knew everybody, and I had friends in the personnel office there. And I went in and I said, who's this new person I see walking down the hall? I said, that's a new draftsman that they just hired, and she's working here. And I said, so I asked Merle Luce was working in personnel. I said, find out for me a little bit about her. Find out if she's married, how old she is. I thought she looked older than me, so I had to check that out. So Merle got into the records, strictly against rules and regulations. She came back and said, yeah, she was born in 1935. She isn't married. She has some children. And I said, okay, thanks a lot. Well, it was the next day or so that I was having a little social after work. I did that periodically. I just go around to the people I knew there and say, have a little get together after work, come over. And I lived right across the street, so it was easy for people to come right over there. We'd have a few drinks, a few snacks, then we'd go out and eat somewhere, the group. I'd have a dozen people maybe. And so I saw Julia, and she was going down the hall and went into the Xerox room, where you go in and make copies of stuff. I followed her in. And I said, I'm having a little get-together after work this evening. Would you like to come over and join us? She said, well, I'll see about it. And I went home after work, and we got off at 4 o'clock. I went home after work, and everybody else that I had invited showed up. 5 o'clock came, she wasn't there. 5:30 came, she wasn't there. 6 o'clock came. So I said, well, I can write that one off. And just a little after that, she showed up. Well, she came in and sat down, and I had a recliner there, and she sat down in it. And Clyde Jones was working at the center, and he lived right down he was a single guy, and he was a real womanizer. He really chased women all over. And as soon as Julia sat down, he got up and went over and sat down on the arm of that recliner. And I didn't like that. And I thought, well, I know it's not a date, but she doesn't belong to him. So I went over and just took his arm and moved it away from her back. And he got the idea. So we went out and ate afterwards. And after that, there's never been anybody since. That started the...
So so that was Dad's first attraction, and stuff, when did you know that you were attracted and interested in Dad?
Well,
I mean, was it after?
I guess we had that, you know, it wasn't a date, it was, you know, a group. But I thought he was nice, but, you know, having you 3 children at home, I really wasn't. I'd been single for 7 years and didn't really think about getting married or having a close boyfriend, I guess. So we had a few more dates and I really was attracted to him, and we always had a good time, you know, when we did things.
And then I started spending a lot of time at your place because you had the kids, and so we had to do everything as a group. And the kids were easy to fall in love with.
So that, just one quick question then. So between that party at your house and the decision to come together and move to Oklahoma, how long was that?
Oh, it was, yeah, close to 1.5 years. And the thing is, he got the scholarship to go to Oklahoma. So we talked about it and decided he would go on to Oklahoma. And when he came back, if we were still in love, we would get together. So one night he calls me on the phone and he says, "Are you going with me or not?"
I thought she was playing hard to get.
But what a decision that I didn't think too much about. I just knew I didn't want to leave her and the kids. And so that involved so much that I wouldn't begin to think about undertaking now. Because she owned her house.
Yeah.
So
That was a big decision.
and I had, all my furniture was mine in the apartment where I lived. And so we had to go with it. So Emmett let us use a lot of space in his basement to put the extra furniture. The rest of it we put in a U-Haul truck and pulled a trailer behind it. And we started out.
Washington, D.C. to Norman, Oklahoma.
And I had a car.
And Aunt Sherry was with us.
Yeah, she drove the car a lot. And I drove the truck. And I always had 2 of your kids with me in the truck. And I'll tell you this, I think I can get through it. We had been traveling it took us 2 or 3 days to get there because we didn't push ourselves too hard. And Terry and Kami were riding with me in the truck.
You can do it. You can do it, Dad.
You can do it.
And we were driving along, just talking, and Terry said, they didn't even call me Ed. Said, "Ed, Kami and I have been talking, and we'd like to call you Daddy."
Oh, that makes me tear up.
Yeah. Well, Mom and Dad, we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. We'll probably do it again a few times. But you both made it easy to grow up as kids.
Yeah.
That's for sure, because it was not an easy thing you guys were going through, and made it seem pretty easy to us.
Well, I'm glad you say that, but I am kind of an impatient person, and I'm sure I didn't make it easy.
Well, no, that kept things going.
Did you say kinda?
Yeah.
All right. Love you guys.
Love you.
Love you, Dad.
Love you too.
You're the best, you guys.
That was
You're the
fun.
best.
Yeah. Love you guys.
Love you.
I'm lucky.
Yeah, we're all lucky.
We are.
We're all very lucky.
Yeah.
I wasn't recording.
What?
I wasn't recording.
None of
Are
it?
you kidding?
Yeah, I'm joking.
Oh, Eddie Ferguson.
I'm taking your cape away.